called Creating a Healthy Church. And this is the last sermon in the series, and all the people said, oh yeah, I knew you were ready. I knew you were ready. But today we're going to talk about growing hearts like Jesus. To follow Jesus means that you have movement in your life. It means that you're moving forward for Him and for His cause. You just can't sit still in the Christian life. There's always movement forward. Excuse me. I can't see these folks over here. Jesus uses words like come, follow, go, obey, send, and do. So there's always movement. This is not a faith that you just sit around and do nothing at all. It's an active faith. One of the examples is found in Mark chapter 16 and verse 15, where Jesus says to His followers, go everywhere that's comfortable to you and share the good news to everyone that you like. Oh, no, that's not what it says, is it? No, it says, go everywhere in the world and tell the good news to everyone. You ought to circle the words everywhere and everyone. That's pretty inclusive. Now, when Jesus said this, of course, it was physically impossible. They could not go everywhere and tell everyone. They couldn't go to Australia, Latin America. They couldn't even come to North America. Most of the world was really off limits when Jesus said this. There were no sea-bearing vessels that could take them around the world. There were no planes, trains, or automobiles. No internet, no Twitter. No cell phones, no TV. You see, they didn't have all of the devices that we have in our world today. They just couldn't go everywhere. But not anymore. We're one of the first generations with this great privilege. Today, did you know you can go almost anywhere in the entire world in 24 hours? In our world today, you can travel almost anywhere and talk to almost anyone that you wanted to if you really wanted to. Time and inventions have changed everything. Now, I don't think that God brought us all together here today by chance or by mistake. I actually believe that maybe 1,000 years before we were ever born, that Jesus knew who would even be here in this sanctuary today. He knew who was going to be here. And He didn't bring us together on this Sunday morning so we could just sit, soak, and sour. He brought us here to be a part of His plan, to reach people in our area where we live, and to reach people beyond the area where we live. So how do we do that? How do I become a culture changer in the world today? Well, I think there are some things that we need to remember about God. God doesn't care too much about your background. God's not too worried about all the fears that you may have. What matters is not even how many sins you may have committed in your past. What matters is not your ability, not even your age. God says, what I'm looking for today is availability. I'm looking for people who are available. God is not looking for the most talented people to use. He's looking for the most available people to use. In 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9, this is a great scripture. We've used it before. It says, the eyes of the Lord range. In other words, they're going to and fro throughout all of the world. Throughout all of the world, God is looking for people who are totally committed to Him. It says here, He's looking all around to find people to use, to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. All God wants from you is not super talent. He doesn't want some kind of super energy or super intelligence. What He wants is a committed heart. And that's why today we're looking at growing a heart like Jesus Christ, because it always starts in the spiritual heart of man. So how do we do that? How do we grow a heart like Jesus Christ? Well, I'd like for us to look at 4 things this morning. We'll move as fast as we can. First of all, you must care about what Jesus cares about. That's the starting point for all of us. We must learn to care about what Jesus cares about. The Bible says in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 2, "Be full of love, following the example of Christ, who loved you and gave himself to God as a sacrifice to take away your sins." He says, you want to be like Jesus? Then you're going to have a sacrificial love in your heart. You're going to have to follow the example of Jesus Christ so that you'll be full of love for others and care about the things that Jesus cares for. So what does Jesus care about? Well, 2 things that I think Jesus cares very deeply about. Number 1, he cares about the whole world. The whole world. He created it. He created everything that's in it. He created it, and he came to die for the world on the cross. The Bible says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. I like that word "so" in there, don't you? God just didn't say, oh, I love you. It says, I so loved you. That adds a little bit. He's willing to die for us. Sympathy is when somebody is hurting and you say, I'm sorry you're hurting. And perhaps you send them a card. That's sympathy. Empathy says, I want you to know I'm hurting with you. I enter into your hurt. Compassion is saying, I'll do anything that I possibly can to stop the hurting that you're going through in your life, even if it means dying on the cross. You see, Jesus was always moved with compassion. He didn't just go, oh, I love you. He was moved by great compassion for you and for me. Well, God is saying, that's the way I want you to treat the outside world. You know, the world that doesn't have faith in Christ. The world that doesn't have a personal relationship with Christ. That's the love that I want you to have for him, for them. Not just loving one another, but loving the lost world just as much as I loved the lost world. I want you to love them with all of your heart. Jesus loves everybody. He never made anyone that he didn't love. He loves people that you don't love. He loves people that you disagree with. He loves people that you think are very evil in this world. Did you know he loves them? If you're going to have the blessing of God on your life, if we're going to have the blessing of God on our church, then our life, our heart must be like Jesus. We'll have to learn to love people the way Jesus Christ loved people. Here's what it says in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He says, I looked out, I saw humanity. They were hurting. They were messed up. They were harassed. They were helpless. They were confused about life. They're worried. They're bored. They're bitter. They feel guilty. They feel ashamed about what they've done. And my heart, Jesus said, I have compassion. My heart actually goes out for them. If you're going to be like Jesus, if you're going to be a culture changer, if you're going to change your family, if you're going to change the community you live in, you've got to care about people in the world, just like Jesus cares about people in the world. Secondly, not only does Jesus love the world, but there's there's actually something He loves even more, and that's His church. That's His church. If you're going to be like Jesus, you're going to have to care about the church. You say, well, why do I need to do that? Why don't I just have faith in Christ? No, Jesus loves the church. The church is the body of Jesus Christ. He loves His body. The church is the flock of Christ. He loves the family. It's the most important thing to Him. The reason everything exists in the world today is because Jesus Christ wanted a family. You see, everything else is going to be destroyed like we know it today. The life we have now, one day it's going to go away. It'll be reorganized under Christ when He comes. But God's family is the only thing that's going to last forever. Matthew 6 and verse 18, Jesus said, I will build my church. He's not building countries. He's not building businesses. He's not building government organizations. He's not building parachurch or charity organizations. Jesus has one business. That is to build the church of Jesus Christ. His family, His bride, His body, His flock. He said, I will build my church, and the powers of hell will not keep it from happening. There might be some battles that we're going to fight along the way. We might even lose a skirmish once in a while. But God's in control, and He's moving the church to a focal point. God is saying, this is what I care about. I care about the lost world. I love my church that's going to last forever. Number two, if you want to have a heart like Jesus, and this one may shock you a little bit, but you're going to have to be indifferent about the things that God is indifferent to. You say, well, I didn't know that we should be indifferent about anything. Well, yes, you should. Why? Because everything is not equally important in the world. Not everything is going to last in this world. So we should invest our lives in things that matter and not care too much about the things that don't matter. Jesus was indifferent to a lot of things. He didn't really care about those things that didn't fulfill the mission of God and the will of God that He had been called to do. Jesus was indifferent to personal danger. You remember when they were out on that boat and the storm came up and there's Jesus asleep and all the rest of them are fearful and Jesus is asleep? He knew God had him in His hands. He wasn't worried about danger. He was indifferent to the opinions of others. He was indifferent to religious traditions. He constantly broke the religious traditions which made the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious leaders of that day very angry. All Jesus valued relationships more than rules. He valued people more than principles. Why, you're not even supposed to do that today. Oh, by the way, I love you. You know, our church is a little different. And you've let it happen, and you've helped it happen. We don't have a lot of tradition here. Did you know that? I think about that when I read the scripture about how Jesus didn't care too much about all the traditions of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. I'm glad you gave us a little bit of freedom to develop something else here than normal church. Oh, here you are sitting around tables too. He also healed on the Sabbath. He did all kinds of things. He always put the needs of the outsider ahead of the needs of the insiders. I've always liked that. That's what we try to do here every Sunday morning. We want to put the needs of the outsiders ahead of the needs of the insiders. You see, Jesus did that because it's all about love. Jesus was indifferent to human timetables. They were always trying to speed Jesus up. They were always trying to make him hurry. They were always trying to get him under pressure. But he always went on his own timetable. His time clock was the will of God. This one's going to surprise you and upset you. Jesus wasn't much interested in politics. He really wasn't. He could have cared less. One time a politician talked to him about this, and he gave a tremendous answer. Here it is. My kingdom is not of this world. If it was, I would have commanded my servants to fight. Jesus didn't try to overthrow the Roman Empire. He didn't try to revise it or reform it. He didn't come to change the political system in Israel. His one agenda was to build the kingdom of God. Sometimes when Jesus was indifferent, it almost seems like he was rude. Have you ever thought about that? Let me give you a couple examples. Luke chapter 9 and verses 59 through 62. He said to a man one day, he said, "Come and follow me." But the man said, "Lord, let me first bury my father." Here's how Jesus answered that. Well, he said, "Let the dead bury the dead." That sounds rude, doesn't it? That's a little rude. Instead, he said, "Go everywhere and tell about the kingdom of God." Another man said, "I'll follow you, Lord, but let me first go home to my family." Jesus said, "Anybody that puts his hand to the plow and keeps looking back is not worthy to be a servant in the kingdom of God." Wow! That sounds pretty harsh. Sounds pretty rude to me. I don't think I could get away with that. So what is Jesus saying? Well, first of all, Jesus knew what was in the hearts of those people. He knew if that was just an excuse or if it was a reality that needed to be taken care of. But in both phrases, it boils down to the same problem. They said, "Lord, me first." Both of them said, "Lord, me first." You can't say, "Lord," and "me first." It's a contradiction. Either you're going to be first in your life, or God is going to be first in your life. Which is it? You can't have it both ways. Jesus needs to be first. That's tough on us in our society. I understand that. I know this is a tough message. It's the last one on creating a healthy church. We live in a totally me-first society. It's all about me. It started years ago, when they quit pumping gas. Some of you young folks may not remember, but you used to be able to drive into a filling station and someone would come out and pump the gas in your car. Not anymore. It's me first. But Jesus is saying, it's not about you. It's about me. Now, what did Jesus mean when he said, "Let the dead bury the dead"? He's talking about spiritually dead people. People who do not have a life in Jesus Christ. He's saying those of you who are spiritually dead, those of you who do not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, let them do all these things that anybody can do. But if you're a follower of Christ, if you're alive in Him, you're indispensable because you have a mission in life. He is saying, if you're a follower of me, if you have my Spirit in you, if you know the purpose of your life, you need to make your life count for Jesus Christ. Don't waste it on stuff that anybody could do. Non-Christians can do a lot of things too. Do things that only a believer in Christ can do, with the power of God working in them. Let me give you a couple very specific things that you need to be indifferent to if you're going to have a heart like Jesus, if you're going to change your culture. First of all, Jesus was indifferent to impressing other people. He was indifferent to impressing other people. You're going to have to decide in your life who you want to impress. Jesus would say, I'm not here to impress the culture. I'm not here to impress popular opinion. I'm here to do the right thing for God. John 5:41, Jesus said, your approval or disapproval means nothing to me. He was indifferent to peer pressure. He was indifferent to the expectations of other people. The second thing that Jesus was indifferent to, and this one's a little bit harder, he was indifferent to getting rich. He was indifferent to getting rich. Your life just isn't about getting rich. He says, that's not my agenda. It shouldn't be yours. Luke chapter 12 and verse 15. Life is not measured by how much one owns. Life is not about acquisition. Our purpose in life is not about storing up things. Life is about relationships with God, with other people. Life is about preparing for eternity. Jesus said a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he has or of his possessions. We don't like to hear that. We have so much. How many houses do we have? Cars. Shoes. You see, your value as a person has nothing to do with your values or your net worth in life. In Matthew 6, Jesus said, it's not on your worksheet, he said, don't worry about having enough. He said, don't worry if you have enough to eat or enough to drink or about the clothes that you're going to wear. For he said, this is what the world worries about. This is what the world worries about. Unbelievers worry about these things. But your heavenly Father knows what you have need of. So he's saying, as Christians, this isn't what we should be concerned about. Be concerned, first of all, with the kingdom of God and what has his approval. And you say, well, what is that? Go everywhere. Tell everyone the good news. Then all these other things will be added unto you. Jesus is saying, if you'll make living for me a priority for your life, instead of living for yourself, I will provide you with all these other things that you need in life. Jesus has to be first. He must be first. Thirdly, if you want a heart like Jesus, you must get angry about the things that Jesus gets angry about. And as soon as I say that, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, I thought anger was a sin. Well, here's the thing. There's a wrong kind of anger and there's a right kind of anger. You see, there's a good anger and there's a bad anger. There's righteous anger and there's unrighteous anger. In fact, the Bible tells us the difference in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 26. It says, be angry without sinning. What's the difference between a right anger and a wrong anger? The wrong kind of anger is a selfish anger. It's the kind of anger that comes because you hurt me or you made me afraid. You frustrate me. And so I got angry. The reason that's wrong, it's about us. It's about us. It's wrong because it's all about you. The right kind of anger is the anger based on love. It says, I love and therefore I'm angry about some things. When you see, for instance, over 2 million young girls who are sold into sex slave every year around the world, and some of them are coming across our border like that. Well, somebody ought to get angry about that. Selling all those young people into sex slaves. When you see people suffering, when other people have so much, shouldn't we get angry about that? Since we have so much. When we see injustice, when we see poverty, when we see prejudice, when we see things that aren't fair, well, somebody ought to get angry about all of that. A lot of people don't realize that anger is not always sin. God gets angry. He has righteous anger. By the way, it's kind of interesting that Jesus never got angry with the unbelievers in his day. He always got angry at the religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees, people who said they trusted in him, people who claimed to follow him, but they didn't. They didn't. He was angry about people who talked one way and then did a different way. Did you know Jesus gets angry about that yet today? He does. He gets angry at people who try to use religion to make money. He got upset with the religious people. In fact, he went to the temple one day, and you'll remember he was there with the money changers. They had made it into a flea market. They preyed on poor people who couldn't afford animal sacrifices for their sins. Well, it kind of made Jesus angry. He turned the tables over. He began to throw stuff around, and he kind of cleared the place out. And he said, my house needs to be a house of prayer. You see, most of us don't have an image of God like that. We see him as a meek, gentle, kind person. But the truth is, Jesus was a man's man. There were times when he was a man's man. And when things were evil, when things were unjust, when things were unfair, he got angry. Now, I want to give you a couple things that Jesus got angry about, and I think we need to get angry about if we're going to be like Jesus. First, Jesus gets angry when the needs of children are unmet. For example, in Matthew chapter 10 and verses 13 and 14, people brought children to Jesus, hoping that he might touch them, bless them, pray for them. You remember the disciples tried to stop him? And when Jesus saw this, he was angry. And he said, don't push the children away from me. They're right in the center, he's saying, of life in the kingdom. When children are mistreated, when children are aborted, when children are abused, when children are uncared for, When children are untaught at church and their needs are unmet, God gets angry about that. He's saying, don't ever hurt the children. If you go off and you build your reputation, if you go off and have your fun and leave your kids in a lurch because you want to have an affair and you want to live the wild life, I believe you're in trouble. I believe God gets angry, real angry about that. So Jesus said, you need to care about the children. Get involved in the church. Teach the children. Care for the little children. There's another thing that Jesus gets angry about. It's when the suffering of others is ignored. In Luke chapter 11 and verse 46, Jesus said, woe to you, religious leaders, because you load people down with a burden they can hardly carry, and you yourselves do not even lift a finger to help them. Did you know that half the world lives on $2 a month? A day. Did you know there is 1 billion people who live on $1 a day? How many dollars do you have? Shouldn't someone do something about that? We do. When we give to world missions, we're helping with that. The Nazarene Church has a compassionate ministry that helps with all of that. In fact, we're in 164 world areas right now today. There are 197 countries in the world. And we're helping work going on in 164 world areas. But probably we could do more. Did you know that there are people in America that don't have enough to eat? Let's get back to the children a minute. They tell us that over 30,000 children die every day. They die from preventable diseases like measles, mumps, cough, malaria, things that no one in America usually gets or even dies from. Do you know what the number one killer in the world is? Diarrhea. You know what diarrhea comes from? Bad water. Bad water. And they're dying all around the world. Doesn't that make you angry? Doesn't that make you want to do something? These are the things we ought to get angry about and say enough is enough. If someone tried to hurt and rape my wife, I'd get angry. If someone tried to hurt and abuse your children, wouldn't you get angry about that? You see, we would get angry because it's our God-given responsibility as a father and as a husband to protect our wife and our children. There are some things in life that if you don't get angry about, it means you're not very loving. And we don't understand justice. If we're going to have a heart like Jesus, the fourth thing we have to do is we have to have sacrifice for the things that Jesus sacrificed for. Jesus said, I didn't come to be served. I didn't come to live a selfish life. I didn't come to serve and give my life and to give my life as a sacrifice, as a ransom for many. He didn't come to live a selfish life. Here's the amazing thing about life. If you'll make the switch from living for Jesus Christ and His agenda, your happiness meter will go over the top. You say, well, why? Because we're just wired that way. He wired you to be giving, generous, unselfish, and that's what makes people happy. There are two kinds of people in life. There are givers and there are takers. Everybody knows that takers are miserable. They live the selfish life. They're never satisfied. They're always angry. They're always uptight. But the givers who walk around living life to the fullest, who understand the meaning of life, they're the ones that are full of happiness. When you give your life away to God and you give your life away to others, did you know that makes you a happy person? Jesus said it this way in Mark chapter 8 and verse 35. If you try to keep your life for yourself, you'll lose it. In other words, you'll lose the meaning of it. You'll lose the joy of it. You'll lose the purpose of it. You're going to end up wasting your life. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of good news, you're going to find your life. When Jesus was here on earth, there were five things that He gave Himself to besides going to the cross. I want to mention them real quick, because we're going to run out of time. The first thing, he went out and He helped people get right with God. That's 5 things. That's number 1. He built a bridge to others. Then, of course, you build that bridge. We build a bridge to others. God built a bridge to us. We build a bridge to others. That's called the ministry of reconciliation. God has given us the ministry of reconciliation so people can actually know Christ and actually have peace in their heart and mind and go to heaven. Secondly, He equipped leaders. He equipped 12, and then He equipped 72. He equipped leaders so that the church could continue on. That's why you need to take some of our discovery classes so that you can be a leader in your family and a leader in the church. Thirdly, He assisted the poor. In His very first sermon, He said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach the good news to the poor." Of course, the poor can be poor in spirit, but also poor in material wealth. Does God have a favorite? Yeah. This might surprise us. It's the poor. It's the poor. That's God's favorite. It's the poor. He loves the poor. God says, I have blessed you so you can be a blessing to others. Jesus cared for the sick. The Bible says Jesus went into every village preaching, teaching, and healing. Healing is a part of the Christian work. I think that's why in all these countries, when the missionaries go there, the first thing they do, they build schools and they build hospitals, because part of the Christian work is the healing of the body. Jesus taught us not to just care about the soul. He cares about the mind. That's education. He cares about the body. That's health care. He cares about the spirit. That's salvation. He educated the young. We just looked at those passages that said, let the young people come to me. He wanted them to grow up and learn because ignorance is a prison. We promote Sunday school. We need teachers. We need prayers. It's important to have a Sunday school for the children. Our young people are out in Lexington, Nebraska at a youth retreat. I hope they all get saved. You want your life to count? You want to make a difference? You really want to make a difference? Do what Jesus did. Psalms 2 and verse 8 says, it's an amazing verse, a promise. It actually says, if you ask God, He'll give you a heart like Jesus to change the world. Only ask and I'll give you the nations as your inheritance and the ends of the earth as your possessions. I wonder this morning, would you be willing to ask God to give you a heart like Jesus? Would you be willing to put Jesus first to change the culture that we're living in today and to win a lost world to Christ? As we come around the communion table this morning, it's a good time for us to ask Jesus to give us a heart like His. First of all, of course, make sure that you know Christ as your personal Savior. Have you asked Christ to forgive your sins and to come into your life? Have you made a commitment to follow Him? Are you trusting Him for your salvation? And then have you committed your all to Him? Is He first in your life? Have you made Him president of your life? And then thirdly, this is a Thanksgiving Sunday. This is a great time for us to thank God. To thank God for all that He's done for us, for all that He's doing for us. God bless those of you who have been watching by YouTube.